As many of you probably know, the Pope recently allowed same-sex individuals to be blessed together, although their relationship still can't be blessed. Many Europeans welcomed the news, but many in Africa did not. In fact, the continent's bishops released a statement saying they wouldn't accept the doctrine. In many countries, homosexuality is banned, making this a non-issue, but it could prove contentious in countries where it isn't a criminal offense. In response, Pope Francis accepted that Africans would be slow to accept LGBTQ people, given that it was a cultural issue for them, but that eventually the whole world would welcome the news. There are a few interesting things to take from this statement. Pope Francis said that Africans are an exception to the general trend of progress, but that makes them a really, really big exception. African Christians tend to attend church far more often than Europeans, and Africans' population explosion is only continuing. It is very possible that in a couple of decades, practicing Catholics in this part of the world will outnumber practicing Catholics everywhere else, especially given the West's declining birth rates. Another controversial take is the idea that the anti-gay attitudes of Africans are merely cultural. In fact, it is controversial among both them and Europeans. Most liberal Europeans consider anti-sodomy laws an imperialist British import, and they point to the fact that the sub-Saharan countries that still imprison gay people are generally former British colonies. For Africans, the Pope's statement is controversial because it implies that they don't actually hate gay sex because the Bible bans it. They just don't like it because of culture. In response, they will point out the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and verses like Leviticus chapter 18 verse 22. It's not just because of culture. We followed the Bible's instructions and the Bible told us not to accept this, so we won't accept it. They also don't like the imperialism arguments because that implies that their cultures accepted homosexuality before the Europeans came, and it means that one of the few major cultural values that separates them from white people was brought over by white people. Most nationalistic-minded folks don't find such an idea very funny. Regardless, what is clear from this controversy is that much of this has nothing to do with God. African politicians are correct in citing the Bible as the source of their views, but they also regularly persecute political opponents, divert foreign aid to their own pockets, and frequently give up on the whole democracy idea and take power by force. All those hungry Zimbabweans during Mugabe's regime didn't care if Britain was exporting LGBTQ propaganda if their country couldn't import food. European priests, on the other hand, have seen that their influence is declining, and so they are accepting homosexuality without any biblical evidence in an attempt to gain favor among the youth. The Bible shows that people who try to do this will not succeed. As it was said in Jeremiah, "And when thou art spoiled, what wilt thou do? Though thou clothest thyself with crimson, though thou deckest thee with ornaments of gold, though thou rentest thy face with painting, in vain shalt thou make thyself fair. Thy lovers will despise thee. They will seek thy life." Jeremiah chapter 4 verse 30. First, they will be punished for basing their positions on those of people who don't believe in God. As it was said in 1 Peter, "For the time has come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God?" 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 17. It is only then that unbelievers will be punished, and not with fire, but just with the rescinding of the invitation of eternal life. Paul tells us, "These shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power." 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 9, according to the New King James Version. A lot of pastors try to scare people into being straight with stories of hellfire and the like, but if people don't want to be saved, there's nothing you can do. Thus, my advice is that our faith in God should be based not on what politicians, priests, and other authority figures say, but on what God says. As it was said in Acts, "Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, We ought to obey God rather than men." Acts chapter 4 verse 29. Our views shouldn't be based on those of African leaders who are distracting their people from more important issues, or those of Catholic priests who are just trying to preserve the church and their own status. After all those people will be denied eternal life because of their deceit and the lies they've told. As it was said in Hosea, Ephraim compasseth me about with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah yet ruleth with God, and is faithful with the saints. Hosea chapter 11 verse 12. It is only those who accept the Bible, regardless of how they feel about some of its verses, who will be saved in the end. I also have advice for the Pope. He needs to let the Africans take their decision, even if it may split the church. If the church can provide biblical evidence to condemn their views, then by all means they should be condemned. But if not, the Pope should leave them alone. The Pharisees faced the same problem 2,000 years ago. Gamaliel advised them, "Refrain from these men, and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it. Yes, haply ye be found even to fight against God." Acts chapter 5 verses 38 to 39. Both sides have their arguments, but it seems that the Africans have the Bible on their side. And that's the end of this episode of Bible Q&A. Be nice to each other, and have a good day.